So yes, it is recorded, so I guess we have to watch what we say a little bit, but don't let that hold you back. Please participate. Simon was just reminding me to record. Very well done. I'm notoriously bad at that, which is why it's always worth joining the live session, or you might miss out. What have we got next? What we're also looking for is a volunteer. It's a bit scary, but we're going to try and keep these webinars going from week to week post UniPhi 17. There'll probably be some more UniPhi 17 webinars other than the 6 that lead up to the launch date of the 1st of July. But what we'd like to do is get a bit of a community of practice going. And if anyone has something they think is a little bit unique, a little bit interesting around our software and wouldn't mind sharing it with this user base, we'd love anyone to come to us as a volunteer to participate in one of these webinars and just give a little bit of a show and tell of the way they're using UniPhi. We can probably dummy up some data in our presentation system. You don't have to share your own, but it could be configured to the way you might be using it or something like that. Or if you can share your information without any confidentiality issues, then even better still. So have a think about that. See if you want to get some information out there about the way you're doing things. I'm sure other users would love to hear it, and we'd really, really appreciate it. So there's something to think about. So before I kick off on the specifics of this webinar, which is actually about how we've tried to improve the speed of data entry in the contracts module. So the majority of UniPhi 17 is a rewrite of the contract system, but you'll see with a new time module and with some of the things you'll get subtle hints at in this presentation. I just bumped my headphones. Hope you can all still hear me. Yeah, there's a whole heap of other visuals and other features that have come into UniPhi 17 other than this, but today's focus is on the data entry and the new look of the contracts module for that data entry. But before I get into that, I just thought I'd kick off with something that, I don't know, may or may not be of interest to you, but we use the software to run our own business. Our deployment is called Dog Food. And, we've been doing this deployment, the UniPhi 17, since about October last year, and it was originally sort of planned to be a January release. So there's some bad project management. But I mean, in that instance, what happened was scope creep, valid scope creep, and therefore longer to deliver. And so I thought people may be interested in how we go about doing that when you can't really build a Gantt chart for stuff you don't know you're going to do. And so here's just a sample, a little taster of the way we use the application. And what you're seeing here is an issue, or you might be an activity in your deployment. Sometimes the issues module gets done as an activity. You can see that we've already upgraded, because it's got the time module, our dog food to UniPhi 17. One of the best ways to start to user acceptance test and find the other little gremlins is to try it on yourself. So we're at the bleeding edge of the development. And we've had it now for a couple of months, so it hasn't fallen over. So we've been able to do our business, and it is a bit of a risk for us because it's our operational system, but it does run our business. But anyway, this is an issue to develop a risk history chart. So next week's webinar, I think it's next week's webinar, is all about charts, and you'll get a glimpse of some in this session, but we're going to go a deep dive into the charting capability of UniPhi. And Frida's been the developer in charge of that. She's a front-end developer. She brings a whole heap of how to make things look pretty, which has never been our forte in our application. And so we're really excited about some of the things in the next release she's going to be able to do for us. And this is basically a history of this risk history chart, pardon the pun. So if I scroll down the bottom, you can see my ugly mug kicking things off with actually a risk rating trend that exists in UniPhi 16 now and has been there since UniPhi 7, I think. And so that gave the developer some idea of what we were looking to do as a chart. But since then, we've had, current profile and treated profile, or untreated and treated, however you like to call it. So we've had extra risks, graphs, potentials, and things like that. So she needed to do a few. So anyway, as we go through, you'll see some geeky stuff around what she's doing. She was new to the business, and Murray, as our system architect, had to help her with, as a front-end developer, with getting the data into the application. And so you'll have comments from Murray in here. You'll have prototype mock-ups of what it would look like as screenshots, and where it would go in the system. My 2 cents worth coming in again. You can see this was all done some time ago, and feeding right through. a bit of a gap, and I'm saying, hey, what's going on? Let's get some work done. And you can see it's like, yeah, we ended up being finished in May. And so through that process, you'll see all the actions as well that's basically evolved over time. So the tasks evolve as you find out you need to do them. And including it isn't actually 100% finished yet, in the sense that Murray has done a merge action, which means he's put the development code into the core product, but it's awaiting review, which is where people like Simon and Steph and myself and others, Brian, will basically test out that and sign it off as being user acceptance tested and completed. And that's a completed feature in the product, and it'll go to closed from that status from there on in. And so that's how we also put the rating to low once it's actually been built, so that we know that that's sort of not got a lot of effort left in it. It's just more testing. So that's a bit of a tacit knowledge thing. But yeah, that's how we would develop a piece of software. And I thought it might be of interest to people to know that's how we're doing it. I mean, from a RFI management perspective, I find it interesting as a contrast to the way these things evolve in the construction infrastructure game. All right. Now we're going to jump into, unless there are any questions around that, the new stuff and how it works. So the first thing I'm going to do is basically create a couple of contracts. I'm going to create one in UniPhi 17, which is this interface. We can always tell because we've got the time one there. So I'm just going to go across to the contracts module. And in a moment, I'll drill in on the project. And then this is UniPhi 16, does not have the time module. And I'm going to go across to the contracts for that too. And the first thing I sort of want to explain is, what is the difference in functionality from a cost and a revenue contract perspective? And so that's a filter that exists in UniPhi 16. If I jump across to UniPhi 17 and click the same filter, you'll see that it's been extended. And it's basically accepting the different uses of the contracts module and the cost and revenue modules in UniPhi, where those three modules quite heavily integrate. And so there's different functionality that's available in a cost contract versus a revenue contract. The predominant difference is in a revenue contract, you can assign people. It is something we're thinking of harmonizing. It probably wasn't a need to differentiate the two, but it has been differentiated for some time. So it's quite a job to harmonize them. But and there is a need from some of our clients' perspective to actually have cost contracts able to be timesheeted against at some point in time. So that will change in the future. But that's the biggest difference to be aware of. So when I start talking about assignments and how that flows through to timesheets and then back into invoicing, that's all around revenue, running your own practice, invoicing for your time, but either as a lump sum or however it needs to be structured as a revenue contract. And so with this new net view, what that will do is basically show you, if you're, say, a managing contractor, a lot of the cost will be in the contracts module. So you'll actually have a head contract, which is your revenue contract with your customer, and then you'll have a bunch of contracts with your suppliers. And the difference between the two is a gross margin, excluding your own overheads and PM fees and preliminaries and the like. And so, we felt that was a neat one for some people to use. Because time isn't included in those contracts, it's not really a profit margin. It's just a margin on your what you're purchasing directly for that project. And so that net view gives you that. Project cost is when you're managing someone else's money. And so that's quite neat in some of our deployments where we have project managers and quantity surveyors who use the system to run their own business. So they have revenue and internal cost contracts, majority revenue. And you wanted to know which contract had us, managing on behalf of the client. You can just select that now, and it'll just show you the projects and all the contracts that relate to other people's money, rather as in your client's money that you're managing on behalf of, rather than your own. And so, yeah, it's fairly important to understand the differences between there, because you will have different interfaces. And today I'm going to create a revenue contract. And so I'm going to jump into that. The next thing in doing that, though, is to understand how your roles work and how you timesheet. And so I think in the polling, we had a question around timesheets. So if I just have a look at that, we've got here. So 2 of you timesheet to contract deliverables, 3 to standard tasks, and the other 12 who answered the poll basically don't use the system for timesheeting, which is fine. So there's two different ways of timesheeting, and then there's some constraints even within that. And you need to be aware of that to have what I'm about to demonstrate sort of implemented in your business. And so if you, for example, for a start, a person needs to be in a role that has team member access or above to be able to timesheet. So when you look at roles in the methodology of UniPhi, you've got these roles, you can create them yourself by clicking add and save, and you've got this access level. And if they're none, so a person can be put into a role that's got an access level of none. So even though they've got a license to timesheet, they won't be able to timesheet to that job if they've got a none access level, unless their system is configured to say, hey, allow anyone with a license to timesheet to anything. So some of our clients just say, let everyone go crazy. They can put themselves on any deliverable, they can put themselves on any project, and they can timesheet to anything they like. They just want to reduce the resistance. So that's the sort of complete no control methodology, right through to the thing that says you can only timesheet to projects that you're on, and you can only timesheet to deliverables you've been allocated to. So yeah, that's important to understand when setting all of this stuff up, because what will happen is, and it tricked us up as well, you'll assign something to someone as an assignment. It won't prevent you from assigning the work to that person as a deliverable, because you might be costing it up, but you're not timesheeting to the system, as we just saw in that poll. So it won't flow through to their timesheet. And so you just need to be aware if the person's got an access level of none on that project, and they might have access level of program manager on some projects and none on another. So if they're in the role of client or contractor for whatever reason in this particular setup, they wouldn't be able to timesheet on that particular project, but maybe on others they'd be in a different role and they can. Hopefully that makes sense. All right, let's get into it. So firstly, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go into UniPhi 16, and I'm going to go into a project. And as you can see, that's the standard tabular-based, tables of information system. My dog just yelped at me, which was fun. I saw it coming. That our system has had for 16 versions in 16 years. And I'm now going to drill into the same project in the upgraded version. Ooh, pretty. So that's our first taster of charts. So if you come back next week and you join us, this is what you'll be seeing. But every single module now has charts, and they're pretty good. They're actually telling me stuff about my business that I didn't know. So they are unlocking tacit knowledge. Yes, it is. I like it. So this particular one is showing us all the contracts in there and how they've progressed. So this one you can see it's got quite a lot of claims, about 60% compared to the overall adjusted contract value, and you can see it'll add up to pending, original, and potential and improved variations in this, but it'll do it as a stacked graph to show you how much the makeup is. There's a little toggle over here that you can toggle on and off, because if you're doing a lot of work, it can get quite annoying to have the chart flashing up onto you. It's more of an analysis piece. So you just click that and it goes away, and you're basically in the same screen as before, except you can see that the purchase order number is displayed there. And our friends at Flender are going to love me for that once I finally get it to them. There's actually a few other columns coming in there in some tweaking that we're doing at the moment. Okay, so now I can work similarly to how I work in 16, but let's see the difference. I'll first go to 16 and create a contract. I'm going to create a revenue contract. I'm going to call it Project Management Services, if I can type. And I'm going to select who in my business is the sort of project lead on that, is kind of the intent of this. It'll show anyone on the project team, but you can actually search the whole database and find anyone, and that will, you don't need to go on. That was something that was old. Add them to the, who can believe that resource doesn't have a Steve? Add them to the project as the supplier. Same on the principal side of things. You can, if they're on the team already, they'll be listed there. Otherwise, you can search for ABC, I think there is, and it lists all the ABC architects and ABC construction people. So we're doing some work for Bob Smith, who's the architect. The status of the contract, whether you, so the point within our new release is that we think you can now price up jobs in UniPhi. As a consultancy, you can use UniPhi to price up jobs, not so much as a sort of contractor using, lots of purchase orders that they're going to need to buy. but definitely if you're selling time. The coding system is how you're tracking the cost overall or the revenue overall from a multiple contract perspective. So we'll do this as revenue practice. And we wouldn't know when it's going to commence or because we're just starting off. And this is to put in a default unit. So if it's hours, I can type hours there, and then every deliverable will have the unit hours. And that's actually used in resource planning and things like that. We've got a, mini AI that determines what that unit of measure means. So if you put HRS instead of hours, it'll know that's still hours. If you put days and weeks, WKS, it'll work it out. And it'll use that to determine the effort-driven scheduling that you can do later on. And that was all available in 16. It's just gotten better. So this is the 16 view of the world. I've just jumped in, the project's created. I'm in this edit subnav. I've got all these related templates. And I scroll down and I'm going to add a contract deliverable. And I'm going to do a time and material one because I want to assign people to it. And I'm going to call it concept design. And you can see the hours already come up. I'm going to put the code in. It's don't have a project planning one. Oh, we'll call it something for Chris. Sounds familiar. And that's all I'm going to do for now. I'm just going to hit save. And so you'd have quantity, unit, and rate displayed in here. You'd have all of your invoicing on the right-hand side. And agreed revenue is when you actually sign off the contract that snapshots from the amount here across to agreed revenue. So that's how it works now. If I wanted to assign someone to that, I could. If I wanted to assign multiple people, I'd have to actually change the deliverable type from time and material to deliverable with heading. So if I wanted to put more things underneath that, I'd have to add it as a heading and call it concept design. And the way that would work is then me using my knowledge of numbers to say, I want to group these under the one group. And so you have group and then sort within that group. So now you can see it's like, that's level 1 and that's level 2, but you couldn't go into level 3. That would be it. And you could do as many of those as you like, clicking add every time, and do, group 2 would be detailed design. And then underneath that, you would have to put your assignment. You could use the heading with assignments to fast track that. And then, number 3 being tender documentation, and so on and so forth. And so every time I'm doing that, I'm clicking add and I'm adding that up. And then when I hit the next one and I actually select something that's not a heading, I get a bigger form and I just call that tender. And I can assign that to multiple people and leave it at Chris and then just hit save. And so you can see that when I do assign it to people, it brings in their rates, but it has to be people. I can't assign it to a classification. I can assign it to assets, so that's our starting point of developing, total estimating capability. The tab order in this is pretty good. You can then tab down and say how much time is it going to take, and that basically is then building up an estimate, but it's pretty clunky and slow. So then we go into UniPhi 17. What's happened there? I think someone might want to be coming in. Yes. And if I click add, so this screen is very similar. In fact, it's probably identical. And I'll select that person and I'll select Birdcat Constructions this time. I'll do it to the same coding. Oop, not that one. And we'd put that in there and hit save. So that's the same, but this isn't when it finishes. Ta-da. So firstly, you'll see that I'm in this sub-navigation called value. So the idea is you set up your contract value in a sub-nav called value, and there's no sort of claiming on the right-hand side. That happens under the sub-nav called invoice. In the old system, you would change views here to do different things by selecting the relevant drop-down here. Whereas in this, you just browse to the sub-navigation. So it's a lot less sort of tacit knowledge. We don't like to browse with drop-down menus where we can avoid it. We like to sort of make those for filtering. So this is a filtering. And now you can see there's no add button. All I do is I come in and I go concept design, detailed. Oh, never typed that one before. Tender documentation. and post contract. So I've just done all of those straight away, and I hit save, and I don't need to select any code or anything or assignments or nothing. And then I can say, okay, I want to actually do this in a more detailed way for some reason. I can then drill in on this particular deliverable. And when I drill in on that particular deliverable, you can see it's telling me I'm in that part of the tree, and I click in and it's got a little indentation, and I can go draft one. I don't need to hit save. That's me being old school. In fact, it's taken a little while to get used to some of this stuff, but anyway, once you do, it's a lot easier, and I almost can't go back now. So I've done 3 tasks sitting underneath that. And if for some reason, again, I wanted to say, well, that's still not enough detail for me because I really want to get into the detail, you can go draft one of one. And so on and so forth to as many levels as you like. And so that when I go back up the top now, I can see, depending on how big my contract is, after about 100 deliverables, it always just shows sort of level 1, and then you drill into level 2s and 3s as you need, just so it fits within the page. But you can see the indenting of the levels there. You can see the others. And if I go, oh, detailed design should go after tender documentation, I literally just drag it down, and now it's dragged. And if I say, actually, I want detailed design and post-contract to be sub-elements of tender documentation, I can just click those 2 and then tick the little indent, and I've now got that structure there. And so you can much more visually manipulate and adjust. You don't have to go in the old system. You'd say, okay, I want these around the other way, so I'll make that 5, tab 5, tab 5, tab 5. Well, sorry, make it 3. So it wasn't easy to do because I just messed it up then, and then save. And now I flipped it around. And so, you know, it worked, but that was as far as I could go. Adding assignments and everything else later after the fact to any of these was impossible. This one here was fine if I'd set it up correctly, but these ones I could only do the one. Whereas now when I go into 17, what I do is on the lowest level, I have a little person symbol here. And so if I was to go draft one of one and assign to that, when I go into that, you'll see that there's a filter over here saying both. When I click on that, it says both classification or people. And so what that means is you can actually, if you're early days estimating, you can say, right, just give me classifications. And these are all the classifications you've set up in your system. I've written a blog about this, which published yesterday. What do I mean by classification? So, you know, you have your project role, which is project director, project manager, you know, quantity surveyor, what have you. But then you'll have your classification in the business, you know, junior QS, senior QS, senior PM, and junior PM, and they'll have a rate associated to them. And so you can see the rates associated with this system to these classifications. And so hence you can say, okay, I'm going to need a graduate engineer, an estimator, an engineering manager, an engineer, a cost manager, and then basically go through those and say, you know, 400 hours on that from them, 120 from them, 50 from them, 40 from them, and 60, and you've done your estimate for that particular task. And you can then so on and so forth go through each task and assign that up. Equally, you could know who's going to work on it. You're a small business, don't have too many people, and you can do that. Equally, again, if you win this job, you can then start to switch out the classification and transfer the hours into actual people so that you can get a more accurate estimate, because in consultation with some of our clients, those classifications, there tends to be, like, that's an average rate, and there tends to be quite a significant variation around that average rate. So when you actually assign real people to the project and they start timesheeting, the actual cost will come in either higher or lower by some margin, 10, 15%, based on the fact that there's some, you know, standard deviation around that mean of the rate. So to manage that, the best way to do it is to, you know, if you go all, you can start to, or both, you can start to say, okay, I'm going to kick out cost manager. See, Arthur's only $64. So post-contract, you might drop that out and say, well, we've gotten a cheap resource on this. Probably means you're going to need more time, but let's imagine it doesn't. There's 400 there, and the cost will adjust accordingly. And so you can adjust your cost base basically for that particular project, which will come into the earned value session. That's, I think, webinar number 3. And so, yeah, I've now switched it out to a human for the cost manager, but I've still got a mix now of classifications. What it also means is if you don't kick it out, if you're happy with those classification rates and you don't kick it out to a person, so for example here, Cindy Lauper, she can still sing, and she can also still timesheet to that role as an engineer, and I think she'd be a fantastic engineer. So yeah, you don't need to have people allocated to projects for them to timesheet, but you can still control what deliverables they're timesheeting to by having them only timesheet to deliverables that they're in the classification that's been assigned to that deliverable. So if you were a drafting manager, you wouldn't be able to timesheet to this project deliverable here if you wanted to control that. Like I said, you can configure it to be anyone can timesheet to anything. But if you're trying to do some project controls and get some earned value, you want to put some project management around this stuff. That's what you can do in UniPhi 17. And so when I do that and I go back to my summary screen, you can see it's a few clicks. That's the problem with drilling in, but that's the way it goes. And that's the way it works on most drill in, drill out kind of systems we've sort of experimented with. I've now got another level, which is the assignment level to this particular task, showing me the hours. Now, remember, when I go to do my documentation, and you can see the documentation here, instead of it being related templates, it's now just click new document. And when you do that, it only shows you documents that you would use in a contract deliverable sense for a revenue contract. So that's either a proposal or a contract or a invoice. It's taking a while to do there. Might come back to that one. You could still invoice and present proposals at literally the level 1. So if I was to go level 1, you've got your 2 and possibly your 4 top level deliverables, and you're presenting it's going to cost 62, a few thousand there, etc., etc. Equally in that process, many of you may not know that this is available in 16, but it was buried in the add button. You can actually mark up, and you can mark up just a deliverable or mark up the whole contract or discount. And so if this was your margin on top of that, you could put 10% on the whole contract and put it to our something for Chris code, and you've basically got an increase in the price that will then roll up into the value when you present it in your proposal or in your invoice. And so hence the final part of the estimating kind of capability there. A few other things to notice about this is, if I can get one long enough, hopefully, oops, go back to all. Just need to get this a little bit longer, or drill in maybe. So I'm just zooming in, that's a bit better. Still need a few more. Oh, that kind of shows it. As you start to build long deliverable lists, you can see something that it's a little bit embarrassing to say it's there now. It should have been there the whole time, but it all throughout the system in UniPhi 17, where relevant, the headings lock. So if I scroll like that, you can see concept design disappears, but the headings still stay there. So that when you get down into the weeds of a 1,000-line long contract, which is why we asked in the poll who does long contracts, it'll support that, and it'll scale quite well from a small to a large contract. That's in every data grid that you see in the system for UniPhi 17 as an option. Well, not as an option, as a thing that happens now when you scroll. The other thing in terms of data entry around this stuff, there's 2 other big data entry improvements. The first one is comments. And so when we get to the earned value presentation, and when you get to invoicing, one of the challenges is to know, how much to invoice for. We've had our activities or issues system where people have been sort of replicating what they've had in their contracts and then collaborating around that, like I showed you with the task before. However, now what you're able to do, and people can do this from their timesheet, is comment against a deliverable. So we've got draft 1 of 1 here. If I click on that particular view, it takes me into screen. This is going to get fleshed out with more content, but at the moment it shows you some basic performance information around that. That's going to get expanded on, and I can comment going, way too little time. And I just might zoom out again now so that it's not too bad. And that feedback's coming from the dog that yelped earlier. And so to see that in action in the timesheet system, you'll see UniPhi 17 comes with a fairly dramatic interface change for timesheets. Doesn't really change the data entry, so it's not directly linked to this particular presentation, but the interface has changed, and we're showing now because of the link between that and the contract. So if I go to Cindy Lauper, you can see these are contract deliverables, where these are standard tasks, which is why I asked you timesheet to contract deliverables or standard tasks. When it's a contract deliverable, you get actual, well, you always get actual, but the remaining hours, because we know that. If it's a standard task, we don't know, and how that compares to what was in the contract. And if I go into that contract that I was just building then, there's draft 1 of 1, and you can see she wasn't assigned to that, but because it's in classification, she's good to go with that. Now, if I click on that draft 1 of 1, either as a control click, which opens up a new tab, and I can go there, and I can go. Now, unfortunately, I'm still logged in as me, not Cindy, but you know, she might say, nah, too easy, and just knock it out of the park, right? And so when she does her timesheets, she might then say, you know, I've done 40 hours this week, but I only have 32 remaining. And hence she thinks she's going to get it done in 64 hours, 56 hours shorter than was originally scheduled. And we'll just grab that profit margin for us. Thank you very much. And forget about it when we give her a bonus at the end of the year. Okay, so then the other key improvement is around the way we track the reporting of the consolidated contracts. And so for that, I need to kind of go into a different sort of project than my Doncaster Road one. So I'm going to go into this old favorite. And if I go to the cost module, you'll see, luckily I've got that turned off so you can't see the charts. That's all for next week. So in a bad cost code structure, let's have a look at this one. So I've got a cost code structure here with different construction codes and then some consulting services down the bottom, and we have some budgets and we have some commitments, and this all comes from the contract coding of the deliverables. And I know that with some people on the call, Kathy, you're coming to mind, that would have had a frustration of running our project cost report detail that actually shows you where those numbers are coming from. And the other way to do it was in the old phasing screen. You could see where the contract deliverables rolled up into which code. In this system now, and then recoding it meant going back into the contract, going back into, if I go to our old system now, and then changing this to accounting, and then selecting the right code here to code it to. Whereas now what we do, so run a report, analyze the report. The report had a link to the contract at least, but when you found your mistake, click on that link, go to the accounting view, recode the deliverable, run the report again, make sure the number adds up. Now what you can do is in the contracts module, there's this thing called allocation. And when I go to allocation, what it does is it pivots the information for all of the contracts and their deliverables to now be under the relevant code that it maps into and under what column it's coming into for that cost report. And if I go, what are plumbing services doing as early works? They were definitely main works, and I want to do it to this main works old. I can just drag that material across to main works old, and it'll move down into this. And I can do that for every single one. I'm not sure if I can do it for the whole contract in one go. That would be good. I'll do this one and then I'll try it for the IT one. I'll put that to ICT contract scene. Nah, it didn't work, but that's a good. So this is the sort of comments I want. That'll be good if we could do that. Yeah, it doesn't. You have to do it one deliverable at a time. If you wanted to shift the whole contract, you'd have to do each deliverable. But the main point about it is you can visually see what's making up these numbers into their columns and then just drag that across to the code with the number here being the remaining budget. So by dragging more into that main works, we'll just make that have a larger variance. And then when I go back to my cost report or I run one that I send to a client, this is all updated with that information and I'm getting a new view. Bear with us a sec. Thanks, Karen. Let's have a look. What else do we have here? Okay, so the other thing in this that I wanted to show as new for this particular presentation, which again, just to remind you, was all around the data capture. So hopefully that showed you the creation of the contract, how you can actually create your structure of your contract, which I've got here. And that was all in the value, but obviously then you've got your invoice, and so that's got a new interface. The data entry for it isn't overly different, but it's just broken out trying to be a little bit more user-friendly about what means what. So this is the contract value that you've agreed with the client, and this is your percentage invoice claim. And if you wanted to basically claim directly against the concept design, you can do that, and it'll just filter that down when you save to everything being 10%. So you don't need to do it at the bottom level, and you can just, if you've hit a milestone and you're getting milestone claims against that particular deliverable, and then when you go to raise your document, let's see if this loads a bit quicker. Yes, it does. You can see it's got only related documents, types of invoices and proposals if relevant. Well, in this instance, because we're in the invoice sub-nav, it's only showing invoice templates. Once you select one, that becomes your favorite until you change it, so it'll always be there. So typically there's, some, different credit note opening balance that you rarely use. So it'll mainly just always select your templates. We're trying to prevent. You can see that this has got a naming convention embedded into it, which you can do in 16 for all your templates. And so the document name will automatically be generated. And you can put template variables in to make up what that is. And then when you're in the template control, as I mentioned before, you just go level 1, and then you've just got your nice little concept tender margin kind of roll up. We probably need to work out what we're going to do with that one, to present to the client and give it a date, and away you go, invoice done. So the benefit of it being is you've got a lump sum contract, but you're able to track hours against that lump sum contract to see how you're performing and to find out why. And hopefully through those deliverable comments, raise issues, go back to the client early, get a juicy variation, make money out of that variation, continue to print money and have wonderful lives. Okay. So that's the, the other cool thing is this filter here. So if you've got a long list of stuff, and this will be even better on the cost side, and the cost side will come in on the import, export, Excel, copy, paste Excel. There's a whole heap of stuff around that for QS and PM extended contracts with long variation lists and things like that. So come back for that webinar. But yeah, once you've claimed 100% against something, you can just, have it as an incomplete filter, and it'll only show you things you haven't claimed yet, which could make that list dramatically shorter when making that data entry for that claim. Just for people who, it's just a little different. I mentioned, in cost contracts, it's a little different. If I go to a post cost, over there. When I go to my invoice here, you'll see we're still navigating with one, couldn't work out how not to navigate, but if I go to recommendation, you'll see a lot of columns. And you can see, your contractor's claim, your assessment over here, the contract value and the claim versus assessed. And, I've seen 400, 500, 600, 700 line long contract deliverable plus variation invoices. Hopefully with that incomplete, reducing that list down to just the ones that they've got to do and the ones they're working on with progress. You can then export and import and do wonderful other things that we'll show you in a couple of weeks' time. Any other one to possibly show in all of this is more sort of charting and summary information. So there's actually a summary and a details information now for all the information that used to be just on the details screen. Gives you the basics data around the project. So it's a read-only kind of view. This is what people who aren't working on the project but have program manager access to the system would be able to see. You've got little dials on how you're progressing from claim point of view, how the contract's structured from original versus variations, what's the progress on them deliverables. So that's similar to the progress on the whole contract from the top level. And yeah, just some nice visuals around that. And if you've got accounting integration, what the account balance is for that client would come in here as well. Okay, so that's all I've got to show today. Before we wrap up, there is another quick 2-question poll. I'll just end that one. See if I can. So yeah, we had some people, we had 4 people who've been using the system for longer than 5 years. We love you. Oh wow, that's so cool. People have used the import function. Well, you're going to love the copy paste function. It's even better. No one's used earned value, so that'll be interesting. And a lot of system admin on the call. There is another poll. Just got to work out how to launch the thing. Maybe if I close that. Maybe you already had it. Poll number 2. Yeah, you probably did. No, I've now got it. I found it. Look, that Zoom must know how to do good software. I think someone was going to tell me where to go and get it anyway, but okay, that was Simon egging you on. Come and see the paste from Excel. So, do you know what version of UniPhi you're currently using? If not, ask us. You can't actually find out in the software. That is a problem. But when would you be looking to upgrade? Just to know who wants to jump into this system. And the other thing is just to be aware that we are conducting training as of tomorrow. It's going to be basically covering the UniPhi 17 elements of that training as well, so that people can transition into it. So it'll be a bit of both versions. Mostly it's system admin and issues, so they haven't changed a lot. But from a system admin perspective, any UniPhi 17 impacts will be covered in that. So if you go to our website and go to the bottom and go to the training element, you can sign up for system admin training. And yeah, 2 hours long tomorrow, free. Can ask some questions, get your answers that you need. And remember, also looking for someone to come on and give us a demo. And yeah, there's a link to the manuals there as well. But if you go to training, I think it is unifi.com.au/training, will give you the sign up page. And yeah, feel free to unmute yourself and give us some feedback. Hopefully we haven't been wasting our time for 7 months and there's some appeal to that demonstration, or just some comments and I can answer any questions. Got 10 minutes to go. Got to be some questions out there.
Mark, I think that scroll lock is a godsend. When
Yes.
you've got those long contract deliverables and you have to try and remember which column means what, having that scroll lock is great. Yeah,
and resource planning and other places in the system where you often have long lists of lots of columns, it can be a nightmare. So yeah, it's I've found it very useful already, being an early consumer of UniPhi 17.
I hadn't seen that margin option before. It's interesting to see that as a built-in.
Yeah, so that was an option
now
in the add button of the old system, but I don't think anyone ever saw it because it's kind of at the long list there. You know, you build these things for one client and try to tell the world, but it's shouting into the wind sometimes. Anyone else? Thanks, Karen. I'll have to think of the lucky door prize for next time when you get the answer right. All right, guys. Well, please come back again next week. Even though there will be a video of this, you do get the opportunity that I'm hoping will, you know, be enticing to come and ask both Simon and myself, and hopefully next week, Murray, any questions. We'll be looking at charts and actually analyzing them and saying, this is why we built that chart and this is what you can get out of it. I'm sure that the pool of our users are going to have a lot more, and we plan to build them with the ability to drag and drop different charts into the screens for your own analysis. You can still do the Power BI analysis yourself as well, but that's proved some clients it's fairly complicated. If we can pre-build the business logic for you, I think that'll be more successful. Yeah, cool.
Yeah,
thanks.
And if you've got any other questions at any time, you know, just drop us a link as well. Drop us a line, call us if you want to talk about it. We're happy to talk about it. You know us, we like talking about UniPhi, and if you feel that need, just reach out. We're here.
Definitely register for next week, because
yes,
it was really appreciated having a decent turnout. It makes it far more interesting to try. I think you're presenting to a group of people listening rather than just recording a video for others to look at later. Okay, I think there's one more chat here. That's it. I think we're good. See you next week. Thanks, Mark. Appreciate it, mate. Enjoy your lunch break, everyone. See ya.